why we did that, and then I'll kind of open it up to questions afterwards. So, and guys, feel free, like as I'm going through to like drop any questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. Actually, no, it actually might be helpful. I just let me pull something up really quickly. I have a deck that I just shared at one of our meetups, and it's the same content, so it might be helpful to share that with you guys too. So give me 1 second. Let me pull that up. Ashley, can you make me a co-host so I can share my screen?
Yeah, I can. I mean, you already are my co-host, Tony.
Yeah, there you go. All right, cool. So let me. I'll share the screen in my face right here. All right. Cool. So can you guys see that? Can you guys see the presentation? Give me a thumbs up if you guys can see it. Cool. Awesome. So this is a presentation that we just went through at one of our meetups for last month. So I'll run through it in a more timely fashion for you guys, and we can do some Q&A afterwards. All this is just like introductions. So I guess here's a quick overview of the portfolio where we're at right now. So I'll start here. These are the two houses that we just recently purchased. So this is the Sweet Tang house. This property just went live on Airbnb like 5 days ago. We're already like, I think it's 60% capacity for May, which is great because our first guest doesn't check in until this Friday. So this one's pacing pretty well for a new property. This one is the house that I'm sitting in right now. This is a 70s house, so it's empty right now, but you know, we're slowly putting together the furniture. We got an old school little vinyl player back there, mural on the wall, and the mural outside. So this one's coming together nicely as well. These are some of the other properties that we own. The Sweet Honey House is our first purchase. We got that one last summer in Tennessee, in the Smoky Mountains. This is our first purchase over here in Joshua Tree called the Funky Cactus House. What else we have in here? We bought the Desert Daisy House back in March, also in Joshua Tree. So we've got quite a few properties operating in a few different markets. So like I said, I'll spend kind of the first half of this just talking through how we've been able to purchase so many properties in such a short period of time. I am not some like undercover millionaire that just has like a bunch of money laying around. I'm just like dumping it all into short-term rentals. So I'll kind of walk through the process that we followed, and you guys feel free to ask questions as they come up. So this is just a quick timeline overview of like the properties that we purchased and when we purchased them. Property number 1 was in August of 2020. That was in Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains. Property number 2 was in Joshua Tree, California in September. Property number 3, also in Joshua Tree in September. Property number 4 was in February of 2021, so this year. It says California, but that was actually also Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains. Property number 5 was in March, and that was also here in Joshua Tree. Property 6 and 7 closed within like a week of each other last month. And then property number 8 is actually closing tomorrow. We just funded that deal today, so it should record and officially be ours tomorrow. So we'll be at 8 short-term rentals by tomorrow. All right, so I'll talk a little bit first about like our market selection and like how we land on the markets that we're in, and then I'll share some other tidbits. But we primarily have focused on markets that rely on vacation and tourism as the primary economic driver. I live 45 minutes outside of Los Angeles, but I would probably, at least current state, never buy an Airbnb in Los Angeles or in Orange County. Hey, sorry guys, we're getting a little bit of feedback. If you guys wouldn't mind all being on mute for me there. So I would never purchase something in Los Angeles. I would never purchase something in Orange County, which is another big place by us. San Diego is another big destination. I like places that rely on vacation and tourism as their primary economic driver. In the Smoky Mountains, where we bought our first cabin, that is the #1 vacation destination for that part of the country. It's the #1 most visited national park in the United States. Very similar thing down here in Joshua Tree. It's a very popular spot for people to come and visit. And there's no major universities in these cities. There are no major business headquarters in these cities. You know, there's no like film and television like what you have in Los Angeles. Like what is driving the economy here in Joshua Tree and in the Smoky Mountains is people traveling for leisure, for fun, to the national park and then staying there and enjoying the surrounding cities. So we like that because we feel like we're hedging our bets a little bit. Sorry, I went up one slide here. I'm not on my market slide. We feel like we're hedging our bets a little bit against negative legislation, right? Because that's a question you get all the time is like, hey, Tony, what happens if, you know, I don't know, Airbnbs get shut down in that city? And in places where we invest, if Airbnbs get shut down, that means a bunch of people are losing their jobs, right? Like there's cleaners, there's electricians, there's handymen, there's the contractors, like so many people rely on the economic activity that's brought on by short-term rentals, that if the city of Joshua Tree said, we're turning off short-term rentals, that there would be an uproar from the local community saying, hey, you just took away my livelihood, my way of feeding myself and my family. So anyway, that's why we kind of focus on those markets that are primarily vacation destinations first. One last thing I'll kind of comment on market selection, because I know this question comes up a lot as well, but it's about the regulations also. Like, hey, Tony, what if a city makes it really hard to get a short-term rental? And my thought process on that, and another investor shared this with me, and I've just kind of adapted this mindset, is that the regulations in a city are not connected to the demand in that city, right? I'll say that again. The regulations in a city are not connected to the demand in that city. So say, for example, that in Joshua Tree, they said, we're going to make it really, really hard to get a short-term rental permit. That has nothing to do with the fact that 4 million people every single year are still going to come to Joshua Tree, right? If anything, as regulations get tougher, it just increases the barrier of entry for new and other investors. So a lot of those people who might just be coming in to kind of dabble in the market, they're not going to come to Joshua Tree anymore. So now you've only got the people that are really committed to succeeding in that market. So, as you hear people talk about regulations in the short-term rental space, because it comes up a lot, just remember that regulations and demand don't go hand in hand. And if you're willing to jump through whatever hoops that local city, government, whatever wants you to jump through, now you're kind of swimming you're a bigger fish in a smaller pond, right? So that's the market selection. Financing, that's another big question that comes up. It's like, hey, how have you financed all of these properties? So we did have a healthy amount of capital to start our investments. A lot of you may know I worked for Tesla for 3.5 years. I left last December, and I saved up a lot of my company stock, and Tesla stock's done pretty well. So we've used that as our way to kind of fund a lot of our investments. I partnered with someone else. He bought his house like in 2008, like at the bottom of the market, has built up a ton of equity since then. He did a cash out refinance, had a pretty good chunk of cash from that as well. We were both working W-2 jobs at the time. He still is, I'm not. So we have pretty strong income as well to offset any debt to income ratio issues. And then as we've kind of maximized or used most of our available capital, we started partnering with other individuals who saw what we were doing and said, hey, I want to be involved with that. So, partnerships, Ash and I talk about it a lot, but it's been really critical to allow me to continue to scale our business. So the house that I'm sitting in right now, like we have a partner on this deal. This was actually my cousin, but she's still a partner. The house is like 200 yards down the road. We have a partner on that one. So that's how we've been able to make sure we're continuing to get more properties at a decent pace. Now, what happens if you don't have a set of capital yourself, right? What happens if you didn't work for Tesla for 3.5 years, you don't have stock? What happens if you didn't buy your primary residence at the bottom of the market, you can't do a cash out refinance? Obviously the partnership, like I talked about, but another kind of unique strategy within the short-term rental space is called rental arbitrage. I won't spend much time here because that's not my forte, but I know a lot of folks use rental arbitrage as a way to get started in the short-term rental space without having to actually own the property. So basically the basic premise is you go out, you find a property, you put it under a long-term lease with the owner, right? So this is a property that's for rent. Instead of buying that property, you get it on a lease for 12, 18 months, whatever it is. You let the owner know that you're going to rent that property out on Airbnb and say that you agree to a monthly rent payment of $1,500. You are now committing to pay that owner $1,500 per month. But say you're able to go out and generate, $4,000 a month on Airbnb, you get to keep that spread of, what is that, $2,500 per month. And you do that without having to actually own the property. So I'll leave that little tidbit there, but rental arbitrage is another strategy you can use within the short-term rental space to scale if you don't have a ton of capital to get started with. All right. So now I'll kind of quickly go through the properties that we purchased so far, and I'll talk about the purchase price, how we funded it, how we financed it, and how we found it. And you'll see that as we're going through that there's some similarities between most of these properties and kind of how we're making them work. So the first property that we have here, this is our first purchase as a short-term rental. We bought this one at a purchase price of $590. This is a 5-bedroom, 5-bath cabin in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, about 2,700, 2,800 square feet. We found this one right on the MLS. Okay, people always talk about it's hard to find good deals in the MLS, and sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. This one was on there, right? We weren't trying to outbid anybody. Market has changed a little bit since then, but we found this right on the MLS. We funded it, like I said, I had reserves from my sale of my stock. My partner had reserves from his cash out refinance. And then we financed this using a second home mortgage at 10%. So I'll pause on this really quickly because this has been a really crucial part of our ability to scale. For a lot of you who are going out and trying to acquire your first investment property, you may have heard that the banks want 20% down. That's a pretty common thing that they want on an investment property. Now, if you work with some small local banks, there is some wiggle room there, but the vast majority of big lending institutions want at least 20% down. When you purchase a property as a short-term rental, you have the option of purchasing it as a vacation home for yourself. And that's what we did with this property. And the benefit of using a vacation home mortgage is first and foremost that it's only a 10% down payment. Second is that it's a fixed 30-year term. And third is that it's typically going to be a point to a point and a half lower than your investment loan rates. We've got second home mortgages. We closed on one in February at 2.65%, 30-year fixed for an Airbnb. And that's, rates have gone up a little bit since then. When we're closing on tomorrow is at 3%, but still 3% on a 30-year fix for a property that's going to give us, $75,000 a year annually is a great return. So if you guys haven't looked into the second home mortgage, I would definitely encourage you to do it. This isn't like a secret. This isn't something that I created on my own, right? This is a very common lending option that most banks have. I've done it with local banks here in Joshua Tree. I've done it with US Bank, who's a national lender. So every lender should have something similar to this. So don't be afraid to ask about it. I'm going to pause really quick to see if there's anything in the chat before I keep rolling. So Anna Goldberg asked a great question. She said, for the second home mortgage, I heard you need to live in the house for 10% of the time during the year. So that's a great question, Anna. From the lenders that I've worked with, there is no specific black and white number in terms of how long you need to occupy the property during the year. You do have to use the property for personal use at some point during the year, but I have not been given from all the different lenders that we've worked with a black and white number of how often you need to be there. As long as your intention is to use it for personal use at some point during the year, then typically you're going to be in the clear. We visit our properties in Joshua Tree pretty regularly because we're here. It's like an hour and a half from our house. We've gone to Tennessee, I'd say at least once a quarter since we started investing in that market. We'll probably be back out there again sometime in the coming month or two. But as long as you have the intention to use it for yourself at some point during the year, you should be in the clear. Another question, Jason Bowling asked this one. He said, is there a limit to how many second home mortgages you can have? There are some limitations, and I'm glad you asked this question. The biggest limitation is how many you can have in the same market. Okay, most banks will tell you that you cannot have more than one vacation home in the same market. Okay, you cannot have more than one vacation home in the same market. The way that we've kind of gotten around that is, again, since I have a partner, I got one mortgage in Tennessee, and then he got a mortgage in Tennessee. I got a mortgage in Joshua Tree, and then he got a mortgage in Joshua Tree. So if you have a partner, or even your spouse, right? If you have a spouse, a girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, and they have the ability to qualify for a mortgage on their own, it would be prudent for you guys to only have one person do the loan, and then that way your other partner can get the second mortgage in that same market. So yeah, there is that limit. Now, Jason, one kind of thing to add on to there, I have heard that some lenders will allow you to get a second vacation home in the same market if a certain period of time has elapsed. So say, I don't know, it's been 24 months or something like that, and you want a second one in the same market. I've heard that some lenders will do that, and none that I've worked with, but I've heard other short-term rental investors say that they've been able to do that. Sean asked, how would they know? How would they know how much time to spend in the house? They probably don't. But you know, I'm terrified of prison, so I'd rather not run that risk. Not saying that she'll go to jail, but you know, I doubt that's what they're doing these days. Sean asked another question about can you get this loan under an LLC? So can you get a second home mortgage under an LLC? And the answer is no. The vacation home mortgage is intended for personal use. You have the option to rent it out on Airbnb, but its primary intent is for personal use. And since an LLC is a business entity, not a personal entity, you cannot apply for the mortgage through the name of an LLC. It has to be in a personal name. So every mortgage that we hold, it's in my name, it's in my partner's name, and one of our other partners' names. And that's how we've structured everything. All right, I think I hit most of the questions. So guys, keep dropping them in there. I'll be sure to kind of check back in on the questions as I'm moving through. But that was property number one, right? Pretty straightforward, found on the MLS, funded with 10% down. And this one's been absolutely amazing for us. This one has crushed it, our best short-term rental purchase ever. Also helps that the market's gone like kind of crazy in the Smoky Mountains, but we're still pretty happy with that one. So this is our first purchase in Joshua Tree, California. So we bought this house for $30,000. Total cash flows was about $42,000. Again, we found this one right on the MLS. And you know what, guys, here, I'll drop in the chat here. That way you guys can actually see, if I can figure out where the chat's at. I'll drop in the link to our Airbnb listings if you guys just want to take a look at them. So Airbnb/the Hideaway House. So that's where the majority of our listings are. We just took a new listing live here a few days ago. That one's on a slightly different page, and that one's called the Sweet Tang House. So you guys can take a look at them. So everyone that we're looking through here should be on one of those two links. So we bought this one for the purchase price $300,000. Our cash to close was $42,000. It was a 10% down payment, but we had a little bit of I think it was like 3% in closing costs. Closing costs were a little bit expensive, and a few other things that we funded at the end there. But again, we found this thing right on the MLS. No secret anything there. Just right off the MLS, we found that the numbers worked. Very same process, right? We had the cash available. We put 10% down. And we bought this, right? There's no secret sauce here. We had the capital available. We had the ability to get approved, and we went for it. Property number 3, also in Joshua Tree. This one was another 10% down loan with some closing costs in there. So our total cash close to $36,000. This one was a little bit different. We bought it from the MLS, but we bought it directly from the person who built that home. So the guy that built it, he's both a contractor and an agent. So he built the home, and through buying that house with him, I told him, I said, hey, his name's Neil. I said, Neil, I'm an investor. Our goal is to buy at least one property every quarter. And I told him, hey, I want to buy a house every 3 months. And he's like, oh, really? I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, I've got some more of these little tiny houses that I'm building. I said, show them to me. The house that I'm sitting in right now, I bought from the same guy. The house that's 200 yards down the road, I bought from the same guy. The house that we closed on a week and a half ago, I bought from the same guy. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that once you kind of build a reputation for yourself, and you can build a reputation with one deal, right? You build a reputation with one deal. You share with people what your goals are, what your aspirations are, and you prove to them that you're serious. Then they start to take you seriously, right? And that's how you get some of the deals maybe other people wouldn't get. The house that I'm sitting in right now, we were able to buy 2 properties right next door to each other. We were able to negotiate some additional fencing around the property, and that was probably like $16,000 worth of fencing. We got some additional concrete work done as well. And we were able to do that because of the relationship that we built with this guy. So when you guys and girls find someone that you enjoy working with, make sure to really cultivate that relationship, right? And the way you cultivate that relationship is by showing them that you're serious, and if they send you a good deal, being ready to move on it. So that's how we got our third property. Very straightforward off the MLS, but this one kind of catapulted us into the rest of the deals that we were able to purchase as well. Property number 4, this one was back in Tennessee. Very similar to properties 1 through 3. The only difference here is that it was about a 15% down payment on this one. One of the other limitations with the second home mortgage is that there are loan limits associated with it. So it's 10% down up to like $613,000 purchase price or something in that ballpark. Once you get over a certain loan limit, then you have to start increasing your down payment. We also had about a $10,000 appraisal gap on this property, so we bought it for $650. It only appraised for $640, so that's why our cash flows on this was pretty high. But again, this was with me and my partner. We both still had funds available. We used it. We knew that this was going to be a good deal for us, and we moved forward with it. Property number 5, very similar to the other properties, right off the MLS. We used the cash we had available. But what made this one different was that we brought in a third partner to help finance this deal. Now, remember, we had already purchased 2 properties in Joshua Tree. So my partner and I could no longer qualify for that 10% down second home mortgage in Joshua Tree. So instead of saying, oh, well, I guess we can't buy anymore in Joshua Tree, we said, okay, what can we do? What other options do we have? So we found a third partner. We showed her how our other properties were doing. She had confidence in us and our ability to execute, and she was willing to come in with us, carry the mortgage. That way we were able to still grow our portfolio in that market with that favorable financing. So, Ashley and I talk about this in the podcast a lot about even you need to be extremely vocal about your workings as a real estate investor. Even if you have 0 deals, you need to be extremely vocal about your workings as a real estate investor. Talk about the deals that you're analyzing. Talk about the markets that you're looking in. Talk about the books that you're reading. The more that people know what your goals are, the more that people trust and believe in you as a person, not even the deal, but in you as a person, the more likely you are to find good partners to work with. Now, obviously, there's also a responsibility that comes along with partnering with people, right? If someone's putting their trust in you, you want to make sure that you're finding the right deals, you're doing the work that's necessary. But it's been an absolute game changer for me to leverage partnerships in our business. So the more you guys can work, and it's not for everybody, but the more that you guys can work that into your business model, the easier it is to scale. All right, property number 6, this is the one that I'm sitting in right here. So you can see that this one's different in terms of how I found it. So this one was off market, direct from the seller. So again, this was the same guy that we bought property number 3 from, same exact floor plan, right? Just in a different part of the town. So we bought property 6 and property 7 and property 8, which isn't closed yet, from the same guy. All of these were from the same guy. And we financed these the same way that we financed property number 5. We brought in other partners who were able to qualify for the 10% down second home mortgage. And as a group, we took down not 1, but 4 of this guy's houses, right? And I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself, only because we leverage partnerships. That's how we made it work. So I think that's it. That's kind of the 30,000 foot view of what kind of went down. So I'll look back to the questions here and see what else we have. Anna Goldberg asked, how are you furnishing all of these places through credit cards or extra capital that you have set aside? So before I answer Anna's question, if anyone else has questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. I'll just kind of run through all of them for as much time as we have. We've got about 15 minutes or here. So So Anna, to answer your question, we include our furnishing costs as an out-of-pocket expense when we budget for a property. So we pay for it all with cash upfront. In Joshua Tree right now, our startup cost on these studios that I'm sitting in, these are 391 square feet. We're spending about $12,000 in startup costs for this kind of property. Now there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just furnishings, but that's total startup cost is about 12 grand. We've got just, the permitting fee alone is almost $700 for the city of Joshua Tree to get your short-term rental permit. We've got to put in ring security cameras, which are another $300. We've got keyless entry pads, which is like $200. So there's a lot that goes into it. But our total startup costs right now are about 12 grand, and we fund that out of pocket when we purchase the property. Stephen says, what are some examples of partnership structures you use to divide profits? Stephen, honestly, it's whatever you and your partner are comfortable with, if you guys are comfortable with a 50-50 split, then it's 50-50 split. If your partner wants maybe more because they're putting up the majority of the capital, then it's whatever you both can agree to. We've got deals that span a wide range of different structures. And we're still trying to define what works best for us, but at the end of the day, it's what makes you and your partner both feel comfortable. I think there is no wrong answer in terms of how to structure the partnership. Sean asked kind of a bit more detailed question. Is it almost like a subject to where the mortgage is in their name, but you're paying it, and maybe you give them money up front or interest? Maybe they're a true partner. So it's not a subject to. So the way that we've structured is that after we close on the property, the partner is carrying the mortgage, but we just update the title, right? Like we submit the paperwork to the county to update the title so that me and my partner also show on the title in the property, and whatever ownership stake we've agreed to, that's the ownership stake that's shown like in the county records. But it's not a subject to. Let's see. Yep, got that one answered. So Jason asked, I remember from your podcast episode, you were doing buy and hold rentals in Louisiana, but switch strategies and are focusing on short-term rentals. At what point do you see it making sense to switch strategies versus staying the course? That is a wonderful question. So I actually just released a YouTube video today, like talking about short-term rentals versus long-term rentals. I think it's like 16 or 17 minutes where I kind of dive into, why I think that is. It's on my YouTube channel with my wife. It's called The Real Estate Robinson. So, sorry guys, my mom was FaceTiming me right now, and it kicked me off. Moms, no matter how old you get, your mom always wants to call you at like the most inopportune time. But anyway, I just put out a YouTube video today. It's called long-term rentals versus short-term rentals. Look at the Real Estate Robinsons. We did a pretty lengthy discussion on that. But I think the short answer is you've got to figure out what your end goal is. And I'll kind of share with you why I made the transition from short-term or from long-term rentals to short-term rentals. My first long-term rental purchase, I was netting about $150 a month, right? Like after property management, all that other stuff, I was netting about $150 per month. It was a good deal because I had zero capital into it. I was able to fund the entire purchase. It was rehab, so I literally had no money in the deal. But still, I was making $150. The rehab took like 3 months. And when I was doing the math of how long is it going to take for me to replace my W-2 income, I was going to need a lot of those houses at $150 per door to kind of reach my goals. When I saw the income potential with short-term rentals, that's what made me pivot. I made the realization that based on my goals, based on my skill set, based on the tools that I have available to me, making this switch will help me reach my goals faster. Will that be the same answer for you, Jason? I don't know, right? Because I'm not sure what your desire is to work with tenants, right? I don't know if you heard, but like we just lost power at one of our short-term rentals. So my wife and our other partner are dealing with that right now. I've been here in Joshua Tree since yesterday. We left our house like 9 o'clock yesterday. We woke up today at 7. So we've been here for almost 48 hours building furniture, right? This table right here, my wife and I almost divorced building this table because it was so hard to put together, right? So you got to ask yourself if you're willing to kind of deal with those things, because it is a much more hands-on approach doing short-term rentals than it is doing long-term rentals. But if your goal is just to like subsidize your retirement, right? And say you're 30 years old, 24, whatever, and you've got 20 plus years of working life left in you. And yeah, maybe knocking out a single family home every couple of months or once or twice a year, that works perfectly fine, because by the time you retire, now you've got a really nice portfolio, it's appreciated, maybe you've paid off a few properties and you can just relax. If you're in a situation where you want to leave your job as fast as possible, then maybe long-term rentals, maybe you got to find a different approach. But it all depends on what your goals are. Hopefully that answers the question for you, Jason. So Charis asked, how did you get a high occupancy in your bookings in such a short amount of time? So just to back it up a little bit, we just took actually this house right here, the Sweet Tang house. We just took that one live a couple of days ago, and the majority of May is already booked up. I think the way that you can kind of get high occupancy is by having a really strong product. This property number 7 you're looking at here, this is our second tiny home that went live in Joshua Tree. And we learned a lot after doing the first one about what works and what doesn't. And we were able to implement that into this property. So honestly, I think that's what it was. Now we do some things with pricing that helps a little bit. We price pretty low for the first couple of bookings just to get those ones in. And then we bump our prices up to be a little bit more competitive. But honestly, I think it's a product. I think it's a product, and assuming you chose the right market, I think that'll help quite a bit. All right. Ash, thanks to Lincoln to the video there. So Brenda asked, what insurance types and limits are advised for short-term rentals? So we've got basic home insurance on ours, but we've also got like a short-term rental rider or option. I don't know what it's called. My partner handles most of the insurance stuff, but it's like your usual home insurance like policy, but there's also a short-term rental like add-on that we did there. So we've got that. Then Airbnb themselves, Vrbo does the same. They've also got like insurance policies for hosts. I want to say it's like $1 million liability policy. And so we've got coverage in those two places. There are also companies that specialize in short-term rental insurance that they claim to kind of like fill in the gaps between what Airbnb offers and what you can get through your traditional home insurance. I think one of them is called Prosper or Proper Insurance. I haven't used it personally, but I know some other short-term rental operators that have. Rachel asked, do you use a property manager, and what percentage are their fees? We self-manage everything, Rachel. We knew going into this that we have the skill set, the ability, the time to self-manage. So that's kind of what our focus is right now. I think as we continue to scale, instead of hiring this out to a third-party property manager, we'll probably look to hire someone internally to kind of take on some of those duties and responsibilities for us. As of tomorrow, we'll be at 8 short-term rentals. We've got another 5 under contract. So it is piling up pretty quickly. So as opposed to hiring a property manager, we'll probably just bring someone in-house. Fees can vary. I've heard on the low end, they can be like 15%. On the high end, they can be 40%. But I think the reason I've shied away a bit from the traditional property managers in the short-term rental space is that they don't generally do a really good job. And this isn't all of them. I'm sure there are some really good operators out there, but like, for example, the first cabin that we purchased, that property number 1, right? Where is it at? This property right here. That property was under the control of a property management company before we bought it. And it did like $86,000 in revenue for an entire year. We're probably going to do double that in the first year that we own it. And, it's not like, that was our first Airbnb ever, and we're able to do double of what they did. So it's, I kind of like having the control and making sure that we're kind of driving the business the right way. Sean also asked, are you primarily buying new-ish properties and foregoing any type of rehab? If so, is this the strategy, you can go from buying to getting the listing up. Okay. So you basically just asking, like, are we going turnkey so that we can get the listings up as fast as possible? So far, yes. All of the properties that we've purchased have been mostly turnkey, right? Some minor cosmetic rehabs. We painted the exterior of one. We'll swap out some of the interior design items, but for the most part, there's no heavy rehab that's required. And we did that for a couple of reasons. First was that the returns were still really, really good buying them turnkey. So we didn't feel that it was necessary to give up 4 months of revenue to try and chase almost the same cash on cash return. The second reason that we weren't turnkey was that we were still figuring out the Airbnb space. And we wanted to make sure that if we bought something that was ready, I don't know, we just felt like we were hedging our risks a little bit by buying something that was already renovated, and we could maybe offload a little bit easier if we needed to. Our strategy now is changing a bit. We just got our first rehab short-term rental under contract last week here in Joshua Tree. So, I'll let you know, Sean, how it goes rehabbing our first short-term rental. But the reason we made the change is that the market has heated up so much in the last 6 months here in Joshua Tree. That house that we bought, property number 2, again, we paid 300 grand for that. We could probably sell this house today for 450, maybe even higher. And we bought that in September. But that's how fast the market in Joshua Tree is heated up. So in order for us to get the same kind of cash on cash returns that we were seeing, we can't go turnkey as much anymore. So now we're kind of turning to the rehabs. Susan asked, how hands-on are you and your wife for your business? Other than self-managing the properties, are you delegating some of the other responsibilities? We are extremely hands-on. Like I said, we built the table that I'm sitting at. We put these chairs together. The vast majority of the business we still do ourselves. I just recently delegated some of the bookkeeping responsibilities. We brought in a bookkeeper because that was something that they could probably do better than I could. We're in the process of looking to delegate some other things. Someone who can focus on acquisitions will probably be the next step for us. Someone who can take over the pricing strategy for the properties will probably be after that. So we're slowly starting to try and find and identify people that we can bring on to help with those. But as of right now, it's me, my wife, and our third partner that are handling pretty much everything. All right, Anna asked, what calculators are you using to figure out cash on cash return, because Airbnb pricing vacancy can change so much month over month. So we kind of built out our own calculator for calculating cash on cash return. You're right that the pricing, the vacancy can change month over month. So whenever we analyze a property, we always look at it on an annual basis. So whenever whenever I talk about the average nightly rate for a property, that's the average nightly rate over the entire year. Average nightly rate over the entire year. When I talk about occupancy, that's occupancy over the entire year, right? Because it's going to fluctuate. So you got to do your best to find the averages there. So, if I say a property is going to do 80% occupancy, that might mean in March and May, or March and April, it's completely booked, but June and July, it's at 40%, 50%, somewhere around there. So we look at it over the entire year. Do you use AirDNA? So Mark Madison asks, do you use AirDNA? I was using AirDNA initially, but it is expensive, and you have to pay for each market that you want. The data is pretty solid, but it is expensive. I've recently stopped using AirDNA because I use Price Labs as my pricing tool, and Price Labs has recently updated their analytics. A lot of the same data you were getting through AirDNA, I can now get through my pricing tool, and it's cheaper through my pricing tool, and the data seems to be a little bit more accurate. So I use Price Labs. They have something called market dashboards, and that's the tool that we've been using whenever we're looking to underwrite a new property. Susan, I'll come back to your question. I want to touch on Jason's question because I know we're coming up on time here. Jason asked, if you don't mind me asking, what is your secondary exit strategy if things went south? I've seen this question asked quite a bit. People always ask, what happens if it doesn't work out? here's kind of the thought process that I have when it comes to exit strategies for short-term rentals. As a short-term rental operator, I have to know and I have to understand that there is inherently more risk than what you see in the long-term rental space. I have risk associated with the travel industry. I have risks associated with Airbnb and Vrbo being the gatekeepers. I have risks associated with multiple tenants, guests being in my property on a monthly basis. There is inherently more risk associated with operating a short-term rental than there is operating a long-term rental. So when I buy that short-term rental, I have to know those risks and I have to accept them. So that's the first thing, is you have to accept the risk. The second thing is that, like if you ask Hilton, hey Hilton, what's your exit strategy if your hotel doesn't work out? Are you going to turn it into an apartment complex? No. If you ask Marriott, what's your Marriott? Would you, Marriott, when they're looking to buy or build a new hotel, they're not saying, hey, let's make sure that this will work as a 400 room apartment complex if this hotel doesn't work out. No, they are to their core in the hospitality industry. And when you make the transition to short-term rentals, if you want to scale, you have to have that same mindset. You have to have that same mindset. So what is my exit strategy right now? I mean, hopefully I can sell, like say the market goes south and I see things are falling apart, hopefully I can sell before it goes bad, right? But in the same way that Hilton's core business is the hospitality industry, our core business is short-term rentals. And we're not trying to hedge our bets by making sure that every short-term rental is going to work as the long-term rental. It wouldn't work for us. It wouldn't scale that way. So that's my thought process. Ashley's telling me to wrap it up, so I will leave it there. Hope you guys got some value out of that. Really enjoyed the conversation. Guys, feel free to email me any questions you guys have as well. I'll drop my email in the chat box here, and I'll do my best to get back to you guys quickly. But just know that I'm a little slow on the draw sometimes with the email responses, but it's in there. Tony@alphageekcapital.com.
Well, thank you so much, Tony.
Absolutely. I hope you guys got some value out of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, and you guys reach out to Tony if you have more questions. Definitely listen. Tony has this awesome podcast, the Real Estate Rookie, so make sure you guys subscribe and tune into that podcast. But thanks, Tony. Okay, you guys, I'll see you guys tomorrow. We have our regular session at 4 p.m. Eastern. So we'll see you guys there. Okay, bye.
Awesome. See you, everyone. Have a good night, guys.
Tell Sarah I said hi.